Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So this video is going up a little later than I would have liked to, or at least I'm recording it later than I would have liked to. Apologies for that. But anyway, we're back again. Week 5 NFL predictions. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So once again, looking back at last week, I went 11 for 15. I got 4 wrong last week. The ones that I did get wrong was the Texans versus the Vikings. The Vikings ended up winning that game, and this led to the firing of head coach Bill O'Brien for the Texans, which was long overdue. And then I also got wrong that the Cowboys would beat the Cleveland Browns, and I've been wrong about both of these teams, honestly, to start the year. I thought the Cowboys would be a little better than they have been. I thought the Browns wouldn't have been able to take that next step so soon under Kevin Stefanski, but obviously they've got something working there. They've looked really good to start the year. And then I also had the Cardinals beating the Panthers, and that did not happen. The Panthers looked really good in that game, and the Cardinals, something just looks wrong. And then the last one I got wrong was the 49ers beating the Eagles. The Eagles beat the 49ers, granted only by 5 points. But if there's any matchup I thought would have gone the other way, it was potentially that one, just because the 49ers have so many people that got hurt. But anyway, moving on from that, let's just go ahead and jump into week 5. So for the first matchup here, we had Thursday Night Football, and I would have chosen the Bucs to win this by 10 points, and this did not happen. They grinded out this game. Nick Foles was able to do just enough to get him the victory here. And Tom Brady, last play of the game, you can see it looks like he thought it was third down. So that's something really interesting. I'm sure the internet's going to have a field day with that. So moving on, let's go to Sunday. So first matchup between the Rams and the football team. This one is pretty easy. The Rams are simply the better team, no matter how you look at it. And I have them winning by 14 points. Not much really to discuss here. Next up, Eagles versus Steelers. This is another fairly easy one. Have to go with the Steelers. They're coming off of a bye this week with the COVID situation. The Eagles are hurt, battered, bruised, whatever you want to call them. Not looking good. Barely beat a third stringer JV team of the 49ers. So I'm going to go with the Steelers by 10 points. Next up is the Cardinals versus the Jets. This is another fairly easy matchup. I have the Cardinals winning simply because the Jets are terrible. They need to fire Adam Gase. Still haven't done so. I'm not quite sure why, but whatever. What can you do? I'm glad I'm not a Jets fan. I don't really care that much. So I have the Cardinals winning by 14. Next up, we have the Raiders versus the Chiefs. And I think, once again, this is a pretty easy matchup. This week's full of some pretty easy matchups to me. Simply put, the Raiders' defense isn't good enough to stop Kansas City. And I think that Kansas City's defense is passable enough to where they'll be able to counteract the offensive Derek Carr and Josh Jacobs and get some stops every once in a while. So I have the Chiefs winning this game by 10 points. Next up, we have probably the first real interesting matchup of the year, which is kind of disappointing to say considering what should be the caliber of these teams. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Houston Texans. The Texans just fired their head coach / GM, Bill O'Brien. Should have done it before the season started. They should have done it as soon as he traded DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of chips, but that's neither here nor there. They still have Deshaun Watson, one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and they're going up against a pretty young Jacksonville team who pulled out that one upset in week 1 and just hasn't looked very good since. I'm going to take the Texans in this one by a touchdown, but don't be surprised if the Jaguars give them a run for their money. Next up, we have the Bengals versus the Ravens, and as much as I love Joe Burrow, and I have been giving them the edge this year, giving them the benefit of the doubt just because of Joe Burrow, I have to give this one to the Ravens. The Ravens, although it seems like they haven't yet beat that big team, won the big game, they're still beating up on the teams they should. So I'm going to take the Bengals in this game by 10 points. Next up, we have the Carolina Panthers versus the Atlanta Falcons. Another actually pretty interesting matchup. The Panthers coming into this year were supposed to be basically in the situation the Falcons are in right now, where they're supposed to start out barely getting any wins on their schedule, things of that nature. And the Falcons have found any way, shape, or form to give away football games. They got decimated last week by the Packers, and I think because of the fact that they're coming off of a Monday night game as well, they don't have that extra day of rest. I'm going to give the edge to the Panthers here by a field goal, because I don't have any faith in the Falcons at this point. I really like Matt Rule. I like what he's done with this Panthers team. Teddy Bridgewater has been good enough, done his part, and I think that without Christian McCaffrey, they've still done pretty decent in the running game. So I'm going to take the Panthers by a field goal. I just have more faith in them, honestly. Next up, we have the Dolphins versus the 49ers. Now, this is a lot more of an interesting matchup than I think people are giving credit for. I think people are quick to write off the Dolphins on this one just because of their record on the year. You know, they're 1-3, haven't done so well, but they do have a fairly decent team. They're very well coached under Brian Flores, and the 49ers are hurt a bunch. They're obviously, as we saw last week, banged up at just about every single position on this roster, it seems. Still missing Jimmy G, still missing Raheem Mostert, Emmanuel Mosley, guys like this. So I find it difficult to give the 49ers this edge in this game, but I don't know. It's going to be very tough. I think I'm going to give the edge to the 49ers here by a field goal just because they're at San Francisco. The Dolphins have to travel there. So I'm going to give them the edge by a field goal, but don't be surprised if the Dolphins make this an interesting game. Next up, the great battle in the NFC East everybody wants to watch. The Giants versus the Cowboys. The NFC East as a whole has been a dumpster fire to start the year. It's been absolutely abysmal, and I would hate to be a fan of any of these teams in the NFC East. It's just been terrible football week in, week out. Long story short, I'm going to give the Cowboys the win here. Daniel Jones has not looked good at all to start the year, and the Cowboys' offense is doing fairly well right now, even though their defense is horrendous. Probably one of the worst defenses in the league, if not the worst. But because of how poorly Daniel Jones is playing lately, I'm going to give the Cowboys the win by 10 points. Next up, we have probably one of the more interesting matchups, if not the most interesting matchup of the week. Colts versus the Browns. Both of these teams have come out to start the year very well. The Colts have looked great. They have what seems like the best defense in the league at this moment. And this will be their first true test. Going on the road at Cleveland against all these weapons in Baker Mayfield, Jarvis Landry, Odell Beckham Jr. However, the Browns are missing Nick Chubb for this contest, which could spell some trouble, but they still have Kareem Hunt in the backfield as well as D'Ernest Johnson. However, I think I'm going to give the edge barely to the Colts in this game. I just like their defense a lot more, and I trust in I just feel like they're a little more stable of a team. I feel like the Browns are more of a home run hitting team, and I'm not sure if without Nick Chubb how well they'll do on the ground. So I'm going to give the Colts this game by a field goal. Next up, we had the Vikings versus the Seahawks. Vikings picked up their first win last week against a terrible Houston team by 5 points. Meanwhile, the Seahawks are looking like the best team in the NFC potentially, so I think this one's pretty easy. I'm going to give this to the Seahawks by 10 points. Russell Wilson's on another planet than everybody else right now. They're doing really well. The Vikings aren't going to have an answer for it. 10 points. Next up is the Broncos versus the Patriots. I'm going to give the Patriots the edge here. Once again, pretty easy matchup. Everybody's hurt on the Broncos. I think they get Cam back this week if he tests negative. And they are playing on Monday, so that gives Cam a little more time to come back from the virus, potentially test negative in a shorter span of time. But even with Brian Hoyer or Jarrett Stidham in the game, I would still have to give the edge to the Patriots. I mean, they gave the defending champs a run for their money last week when they had those two playing, and they played not very well at all. And the Broncos team is obviously not the Chiefs, so I'm going to give the Patriots this game by 10 points. Next up, we have the Chargers against the Saints, and this one is a bit of a more interesting matchup than I think people will give it credit for. The Chargers, despite blowing some big leads, have looked pretty decent this year. Justin Herbert looks like he's turning into the long-term option for the Chargers, whether people like it or not. Most people are pretty high on Herbert, it seems. I'm still sort of on the fence about him. Sure, he puts up big numbers, has some decent oohs and ahs throws, definitely has one of the best arm talents in the league. There's no denying that, but it's that 10%, that those one or two just boneheaded, like, what are you doing plays in a game. They just don't instill a lot of confidence in me in Justin Herbert, although he is looking a lot better than I thought he would to start the year. However, the Saints have also been kind of struggling for their standards to start the year. They're 2-2. Drew Brees has not looked like himself. And I think the main factor in this game is if Michael Thomas plays for the Saints. He's still listed as questionable for the game. I'm going to go ahead and put faith in it that he'll be playing in this game. And because of that, and because of how well Alvin Kamara has been on the ground to start the year, I'm going to give this game to the Saints by a field goal. Lastly, Tuesday Night Football. Bit of a weird one. We have the Bills going up against the Titans. The Titans are the team that has been hit the hardest by COVID-19. It seems they must have broken protocols or something because they have multiple guys who are out right now with COVID-19. Meanwhile, the Bills are looking like one of the best teams in the AFC to start the year. Josh Allen has been cooking, doing his thing. Once again, I got to stress Stephon Diggs coming to this offense has really helped them out a lot. And because of how well they're playing, I have to take the Bills in this game. Although I think the Titans will make it maybe interesting. Their defense isn't really that good. And the Bills are going to put up a lot of numbers, so I'm going to go with the Bills by a touchdown. So that's the end of my predictions for this week. How do you guys see it playing out? I think this is a pretty easy week where in weeks past it's been a little tougher to gauge who's going to win the games. But I think this week's pretty cut and dry, pretty straightforward for the teams that are going to win. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Who do you think is going to win? Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I will see you guys on the next one.